I never wanted trouble with the HOA. In fact, when I bought my house, I barely thought about them at all. It was supposed to be a fresh start, a quiet neighborhood, a beautiful home, and the peace of mind that came with owning my property outright. But peace is a fragile thing. And the moment the HOA set their sights on me, my so-called dream home turned into a nightmare. It all started with a letter, a crisp white envelope stuffed into my mailbox, sealed with the HOA's official stamp. At first, I thought it was some generic welcome notice, maybe a list of community guidelines or an introduction to the board members. I wasn't expecting trouble, but the moment I opened it, my stomach twisted. Violation notice. Apparently, my mailbox was non-compliant with community standards. Confused, I stepped outside to take another look at it. It was a standard black mailbox, just like the others on my street. Nothing special, nothing unusual. But according to the HOA, it was 2 inches too tall. 2 inches. That was my first strike. I laughed it off. Surely this was a mistake. Maybe a bored HOA member with too much time on their hands. I tossed the letter aside, planning to ignore it. But 2 days later, another envelope arrived. This time, it wasn't a warning. It was a fine, $100 for failure to comply with HOA regulations. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I had heard stories, neighbors whispering about people who got on the HOA's bad side. How the board could make your life miserable if you didn't fall in line. But I still believed I could handle it. I wasn't about to be bullied over a mailbox. So, I called the HOA office. A woman with a syrupy, sweet voice answered. HOA Compliance Department, how may I assist you? I explained the situation, fully expecting her to say it was a clerical error. Instead, she chuckled. Sir, all homeowners are expected to comply with the guidelines. If you fail to fix the violation, additional fines will be issued. Have a great day. The line went dead. That was my first real taste of power-tripping bureaucracy. Fine. I'd lower the damn mailbox. It wasn't worth the headache. The next morning, I grabbed my tools and spent an hour adjusting it, exactly 2 inches down. Then I took pictures, printed them, and hand-delivered them to the HOA office. Problem solved, right? Wrong. 2 days later, another notice. This time, a different violation. Lawn edging does not meet HOA aesthetic standards. Another fine, $150. I was furious. My lawn was perfectly trimmed, just like every other house on the street. But it was clear now. This wasn't about rules. This was about control. I stormed into the HOA office, demanding to speak to someone in charge. That's when I met him, Gregory Lawson, HOA president. A tall, thin man in his late 50s with a permanent smirk, like he knew something I didn't. He leaned back in his chair, folding his hands as he listened to my complaint. Then, with the fakest sympathy I'd ever seen, he sighed. Ah, I see what's happening here. You're new. You don't quite understand how things work in our community. But don't worry. You'll learn. His tone made my skin crawl. It wasn't a warning. It was a promise. I walked out of that office with only one thought in my mind. This wasn't just about a mailbox. It wasn't about grass. It was about power. And they had just picked the wrong homeowner to mess with. I thought the mailbox and lawn fines were the end of it. That once I played along, they'd move on to the next poor homeowner unlucky enough to be on their list. But that's not how the HOA works. They don't just want compliance. They want obedience. 2 weeks passed without incident. Just when I started to believe they had let it go, I came home to find something taped to my front door. Another violation notice. This time, the claim was even more ridiculous. Your house exterior is not in compliance with community color standards. Please repaint your home within 30 days or face escalating fines. I stared at the paper in disbelief. My house was beige. Beige. Half the homes on my street were the same shade. Was I supposed to believe my color was suddenly a problem? I knew exactly what this was. They were testing me. I wasn't going to let some clipboard-wielding tyrant tell me what to do with my own property. So I did nothing. I refused to repaint. And sure enough, just a few days later, another envelope landed in my mailbox. $500 fine for failure to comply. That's when I knew I wasn't just on the HOA's bad side. I was their new target. The next morning, I spotted my neighbor, Mrs. Harper, watering her plants. She had lived here for over 20 years, long before Gregory took over as HOA president. If anyone knew what was going on, it was her. I walked over, keeping my voice low. "Mrs. Harper, can I ask you something?" She glanced around before setting her watering can down. "It's the HOA, isn't it?" I nodded. Her face darkened. They've been doing this for years. Every few months, Gregory picks a new homeowner to harass. Some people fight back, but most just pay the fines to avoid the stress. She hesitated, then added in a whisper, "You don't want to get on their bad side." I almost laughed. "I think I already am." She sighed. "Be careful. They don't just fine you. They find ways to make your life miserable." As if on cue, the sound of an engine rumbled in the distance. We both turned to see a tow truck hooking up my car. I sprinted across my lawn. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" The driver barely looked up. "Vehicle reported as improperly parked. HOA violation." I looked at my driveway. My car was parked perfectly within the lines. I turned to see Gregory standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching with that same smug smirk. I clenched my fists. "You're behind this?" Gregory shrugged. "Rules are rules." I could feel my pulse hammering in my ears as I watched them tow my damn car away for no reason at all. Mrs. Harper had been right. This wasn't just about fines. This was personal. But if Gregory thought I was going to roll over and let him run my life, he was dead wrong. This was war now. I wasn't about to let them get away with this. The fines were one thing, but towing my car? That was personal. Gregory and his HOA cronies had just declared war. And if they thought I was going to back down, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I spent the next hour on the phone, first with the towing company, then the city. The car wasn't an impound. It was in a private lot held under an HOA enforcement action. They wanted me to pay $700 to get it back. $700 for parking in my own damn driveway. I was still seething when I walked back into my house, only to find another envelope slid under my door. This time I didn't even have to open it. I already knew what it was. Another fine. I tore it open, and my blood ran cold. $1,000 penalty for hostile conduct toward HOA officials. I let out a hollow laugh. Hostile conduct? I hadn't even touched Gregory. But that was their game. Push until you push back. Then punish you for it. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. I wanted to know everything about Gregory and his little empire. And it didn't take long to find the dirt. Turns out Gregory had only been HOA president for 3 years. But in that time, he had nearly doubled the HOA fees and introduced a dozen new regulations. Every single one of them designed to squeeze homeowners for money. And the best part? Gregory didn't even live in the neighborhood. He had bought a house here years ago, but he rented it out. He wasn't even affected by his own rules. He was just sitting back, collecting fines, and profiting off everyone else's misery. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done playing defense. I called up a lawyer friend of mine, gave him the rundown, and asked what my options were. His response? "They're trying to force you out. But if you want to fight back, I can help." That was all I needed to hear. The next morning, I made my first move. I filed a formal dispute against the HOA for fraudulent enforcement. Every single fine, every fake violation, I documented it all. The mailbox, the lawn, the house paint, the car. And then I took it one step further. I requested a full financial audit of the HOA. Gregory was bleeding this neighborhood dry, and I wanted proof. If I could find even one financial discrepancy, one shady deal, I could bring him down. I submitted everything to the city council. And as I walked out of that office, I had one thought running through my mind. Gregory started this fight, but I was damn sure going to finish it. I knew Gregory wouldn't take my complaint lightly. The moment my request for a financial audit hit the city records, I became public enemy number 1 to the HOA. And I was right. Less than 24 hours later, things started happening. First, my trash service suddenly stopped. Everyone else's bins were emptied like clockwork, but mine left overflowing on the curb. I called the waste management company, and they claimed my address had been removed from the HOA's approved service list. That was strike one. Then, I woke up to find a bright red notice taped to my front door. Due to noncompliance, this property is under review for lien enforcement. A lien? That meant the HOA was trying to put a legal claim on my home. If they could prove unpaid fines, they could take me to court, and in extreme cases, force me to sell. Strike two. And then the real kicker. My water shut off. No warning. No missed bills. Just gone. I called the water company, furious. The answer they gave me made my blood turn to ice. Your HOA filed a request for service suspension due to outstanding compliance issues. That was it. They weren't just playing games anymore. They were trying to break me. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the HOA office, fully prepared to tear Gregory apart. But when I arrived, I found something unexpected. A meeting. A full-blown emergency board meeting. The glass doors were closed, but through the blinds, I could see them, Gregory, the treasurer, the secretary, and at least 4 other board members, all deep in conversation. I didn't have to hear the words to know what was happening. They were talking about me. And then, something even stranger happened. A man I had never seen before stood up and slammed a folder onto the table. The entire room went silent. Gregory looked nervous. I watched as the man pointed at him, shaking his head. A few board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And that's when I realized not everyone in the HOA was on Gregory's side. I had allies. I just didn't know who they were yet. I stepped back from the door, a slow grin spreading across my face. If Gregory thought he could bully me into submission, he had no idea what was coming next. Because now, I wasn't just fighting back. I was going to tear the whole HOA down. Section 5. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared, but because I was planning. Gregory had played his hand, cutting off my trash, threatening a lien, and shutting off my water. That wasn't just harassment anymore. That was legal warfare. But what Gregory didn't know was that I had just found his weak spot. The man I had seen in that meeting, the one who slammed the folder on the table, he wasn't like the others. He wasn't nodding along or agreeing with Gregory's power trip. He was fighting back, and I needed to know why. So, the next morning I did something bold. I showed up at the HOA office right when they opened. No appointment. No warning. I wanted Gregory off guard. The receptionist's fake smile faltered the second she saw me. Sir, if you have a complaint— I'm not here to complain, I interrupted. I'm here for a board member. His name? I slid a piece of paper across the counter, a name scrawled across it. Daniel Carter. Her lips parted slightly. For a moment, I thought she'd argue, maybe claim she didn't know who I was talking about. But she just sighed, picked up the phone, and muttered something into the receiver. Minutes later, he walked in. Daniel Carter. Late 40s, tall, well-dressed. But his eyes? Tired, worn down, like a man who had been fighting something for a long time. I didn't waste time. You and I both know Gregory is crooked, and I saw you in that meeting. You don't like what he's doing either. His expression didn't change, but I caught the smallest flicker of interest. I have evidence. I pulled out my folder, the fines, the trash service cancellations, the water shutoff request. They're not just harassing me. They're breaking the law. Daniel exhaled slowly. You need to be careful. Gregory has connections. I don't care. I folded my arms. I'm not rolling over. Something shifted in his expression. And then he nodded. All right. Meet me tonight. My house. 8 p.m. We need to talk. I left the office with one thing on my mind. If even one board member was willing to turn on Gregory, I was about to blow this whole thing wide open. Underscore. That night, I pulled up to Daniel's house. It was on the edge of the neighborhood, tucked away from the main roads. Smart. A man who didn't want to be watched. When he opened the door, he didn't say a word, just motioned me inside. His living room was filled with piles of documents. HOA records, internal emails, complaint reports. And, right in the center of the coffee table, a ledger. Daniel sat down, rubbing his temples. Everything you've gone through? It's not just you. Gregory has been doing this for years. And I have proof. He opened the ledger, pointing to a long list of names. These are all the homeowners he's targeted. Fines, threats, liens. Every single one of them either paid up, moved away, or lost their homes. I clenched my jaw. And where does all that money go? Daniel hesitated. Then he flipped to the last page, and what I saw made my blood run cold. A bank account number. Not just any account, a private offshore account. Gregory wasn't just running a corrupt HOA. He was running a full-blown extortion racket. And now, I had the evidence to bury him. I stared at the ledger, my fingers gripping the pages so tightly they almost tore. An offshore account. That meant every fine, every violation, every so-called compliance fee. It wasn't just about control. Gregory was stealing from homeowners. I looked up at Daniel. "How long have you known?" He exhaled sharply. "Too long. I tried to fight it once years ago. But Gregory, he has power. He blackmailed one board member, forced another to resign. And the rest." He let out a bitter laugh. "They either fell in line or got crushed." That explained everything. Why the HOA board seemed so obedient. Why no one had dared to challenge Gregory in years. He wasn't just a bully. He was a tyrant. But unlike the others, I had something Gregory never expected. Proof. I tapped the ledger. "This is enough to take him down." Daniel hesitated. "Maybe, but the HOA has money. Lawyers. If we go straight to the courts, he'll tie it up in legal battles for years." I frowned. "Then we don't go straight to the courts." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "Then where do we go?" I smirked. "We go public. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next morning, I took action. No more waiting. No more playing defense. I scanned every document, every financial transaction, and sent them to every homeowner in the neighborhood. Emails, physical copies, even an anonymous post on the HOA's private Facebook group. And just to twist the knife a little deeper, I sent everything to the local news. It didn't take long for the fire to spread. By noon, the entire neighborhood was on fire with rage. Homeowners who had been silent for years suddenly had a voice. People who had been fined into submission, harassed, or bullied. They weren't afraid anymore. Gregory had ruled with fear. But fear only works when people feel alone. And I had just united the entire community against him. Underscore, 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 underscore. By that afternoon, I got my first response from Gregory. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't an email. It was a lawsuit, delivered right to my doorstep. Defamation, false accusations, harassment of HOA officials. The amount he was suing me for? $500,000. I barely blinked, because I knew something Gregory didn't. I had one more ace up my sleeve, a government contact. See, while Daniel was helping me expose Gregory's finances, I had done something else. I sent the ledger to someone bigger than the courts, someone who actually had the power to take Gregory down. The IRS. And as I stood on my front porch, holding that lawsuit in my hands, my phone buzzed. A message from my contact. "Investigation opened. This is going to get ugly. Keep your head down." I grinned. Let it get ugly. Gregory had been untouchable for years. But now, he was the one being hunted. The neighborhood felt different the next morning. Lighter, like a storm had finally passed. For the first time in years, people weren't scared to step outside. Neighbors who had been too afraid to speak out before were talking, really talking. They gathered in driveways, on porches at the park. Gregory was gone. And now, the HOA was crumbling. But I wasn't done yet. Because as much as I enjoyed seeing Gregory hauled off in cuffs, there was still one problem. The lawsuit. The one he had filed against me before his downfall. It was still active, still hanging over my head like a dark cloud. I knew it wouldn't hold up in court, but I wanted it gone. Officially. So, I made one last trip to the HOA office. Underscore, 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 underscore. The building was a ghost town. Gregory's nameplate had already been removed from his office door. The receptionist, who had once sneered at me every time I walked in, refused to make eye contact. And behind the main desk, a single board member remained. Mrs. Tate, the treasurer. She looked exhausted, like a woman who had spent the last 48 hours trying to figure out how to save herself. I didn't waste time. I dropped Gregory's lawsuit on her desk. Drop this? She barely glanced at it. The HOA's legal team is reviewing all open. No, I leaned forward. Drop it. Now. Her lip twitched. She wanted to argue, but she knew she didn't have a leg to stand on. The HOA was in free fall. Their accounts were frozen. Their reputation was torched. Gregory's lawsuit wasn't a weapon anymore. It was dead weight. Finally, she sighed and reached for her phone. Fine. I'll make the call. I didn't thank her. She wasn't innocent in all of this. But I didn't care about her. I cared about winning. Underscore, 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 underscore. That afternoon, I got the call from my lawyer. It's official. The lawsuit is gone. You're in the clear. I exhaled, letting the weight of the last few months finally settle. It was over. Completely over. But what came next? That part surprised even me. Because now that Gregory was gone, something incredible happened. The homeowners turned on the HOA itself. They weren't just celebrating his downfall. They were demanding change. And at the next emergency HOA meeting, they voted to dissolve it. The same organization that had ruled this neighborhood with an iron fist for over a decade, gone. No more fines. No more ridiculous violations. No more HOA. Underscore, 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 underscore. That night, I sat on my porch, watching as the last remnants of Gregory's reign faded away. A neighbor waved at me from across the street. You're a damn hero. You know that? I laughed. Nah, I just don't like being pushed around. He grinned. Well, whatever you did, you saved this place. I didn't argue, because for the first time since I moved here, it finally felt like home. For the first time since I moved into this neighborhood, I woke up without a pit in my stomach. No more HOA harassment. No more threats. No more ridiculous fines shoved in my mailbox. Because there was no HOA anymore. Gregory was rotting in a jail cell, his empire in ruins. The board had collapsed. The lawsuit against me, erased. And the homeowners? They were free. I didn't think much about what came next. I figured life would just go back to normal. No more battles, no more drama. I was wrong, because 2 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was another HOA notice out of habit. But when I opened it, my breath hitched. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from Gregory. Underscore, 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 underscore. It was a handwritten letter. No lawyer. No official documents. Just his handwriting, scrawled across a lined page. I sat on my porch and read it. You think you won, but you don't understand how deep this goes. The people who backed me, the people who put me in power, won't just let this die. Enjoy your little victory while it lasts. You have no idea what's coming. I stared at the words, my fingers tightening around the paper. The people who put me in power. That phrase sent a chill down my spine. Gregory wasn't acting alone. There were bigger players involved. Investors. Developers. People who saw HOAs as a way to control entire communities and milk them dry. And if Gregory was right, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Underscore. I burned the letter in my fire pit that night, watching the flames consume his last threat. Gregory could rot in prison for all I cared. If someone else came knocking, if another greedy tyrant tried to take over this neighborhood and start the cycle all over again, they'd find out exactly what Gregory did. I don't back down, and I'd be ready, because this was my home, and no one was ever going to take it from me again. The end.